What's going on, everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking a first look at the all-new Odin 2 Mini. Now, if you're not familiar with this device, basically what we've got here is a shrunken down Odin 2 with a mini LED display. On first glance, obviously, they took a lot from the PS Vita, and we will be doing a little bit of a comparison, just taking a look at them side by side. But first and foremost, I think one of the main things this has going for it is that mini LED display. It is coming in at 5 inches instead of 6 on the Odin 2, so this is a much smaller unit, and they really did kind of make this thing super compact. I've always been a big fan of the PS Vita's design, look, and feel, and yeah, this is coming in a bit thicker, but it's pretty spot on. AYN is offering a couple different variants of the Odin 2 Mini. I've got the black version with 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigabytes of internal storage, but remember you can opt for a white variant and down to 8 gigs and 128 gigabytes of storage. But all of them do support a micro SD card, and this does have a couple upgrades over the Odin 2, even though it's coming in at a smaller form factor. We've got Hall-based analog sticks here, which feel really nice. And personally, I'm loving the D-pad they opted to use here. We will test it in this video, but just keep in mind, yeah, I've been testing out some fighting games already, and this is a really great D-pad they have here. It is raised up a bit, and this one is not using conductive pads, but the way they've got the roll set up on this, I mean, it kind of feels like an analog stick. It's super accurate, and again, that roll is perfect for fighting games. Around back, we've got these linear triggers with a little bit of a swoop, so it's easy to really get to them. Feels like a solid device, but it is coming in a lot smaller than the Odin 2, so definitely keep that in mind. I personally never thought the Odin 2 was an oversized Android device, but some people did complain about how big the thing was, given what we're using here, so the Mini might be perfect for those people. Checking out the overall I/O, down here on the bottom we've got a 3.5mm audio jack, really easy to get to plug those headphones into, and a USB Type-C port. This is USB 3.2, it will do video out, up to 4K 60. Taking a look at the top of the unit, from the left to the right, we've got our power button, LED indicator, volume rocker, micro HDMI, so you could do that out if you want to, if you don't own any USB Type-C to HDMI adapters, and we've also got a micro SD card slot. So obviously, they did borrow a lot of the design from the PS Vita, and I'm super happy to see this. The Vita was one of my favorite handhelds. I've actually still got 3 of them. And yeah, I mean, the Odin 2 Mini is a bit bigger, but if you're used to playing that Vita, you could get right into this device. It's coming in just a little bit thicker, but we've got so much more power than the Vita could ever offer. And we are running Android 13 here on the Odin 2 Mini, so we've got access to Android games and a ton of different emulators that are going to run at full speed given the chipset they opted to use. So the big question is going to be, how does it compare to the Odin 2 when it comes to the size and form factor? And just taking a look here, you can see that the Odin 2 really does dwarf the Mini. The Odin 2 has that 6-inch 1080p IPS display, which I always thought was a really good looking display. But the mini LED on the new Mini does look really great. 155% sRGB up to 1100 nits of brightness. But I would like to say to everybody that owns the Odin 2 already and kind of feels left out about the Mini, you're not going to see a performance bump. Now, if you wanted to upgrade and you love the performance that the Odin 2 is putting out, but you always thought it was just a really big device, the Mini would be a great little option. I would sell that Odin 2, put that money towards a new Mini. But if you're looking for something that's going to outperform the Odin 2, then you might want to look elsewhere, because we are using the same exact chipset here, and in fact, you can get the Odin 2 spec'd out a bit higher than the Odin 2 Mini with up to 16 gigs of RAM instead of up to 12 with the Mini. And when it comes down to it, we're still working with an Android-based device. This is running Android 13 with the Odin launcher if you want to use it, or you could go with the kind of AOSP launcher that we have here. A few settings that are specific to the Odin 2 and the Odin 2 Mini. I'm actually going to get in a bit closer and take a look at all the software in just a second. But yeah, I've actually had a really good time with the Odin 2 Mini, and of course, when it comes to the overall specs here, for the CPU, we've got that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. It's an octa-core SoC, and with this, we get one Cortex X3 core up to 3.2 GHz, two A7510 cores at 2.8, two A710 cores at 2.8, and three A510 cores at 2 GHz. The GPU is the Adreno 740. The Odin 2 does have active cooling with several different fan profiles, plus full adjustment if you want to go that route. You can pick this up with either 8 or 12 gigabytes of LPDDR5X RAM, 128 up to 256 gigabytes of storage, and both of them use UFS 4.0, so it's really fast. A 5-inch mini LED display at 1920 by 1080, 155% sRGB, so it is a bit oversaturated, something that I personally like. And it'll do up to 1100 nits of brightness, so much brighter than the original Odin 2's IPS display. It's got dual front-facing speakers, and I will tell you that I think the original Odin 2 sounds better. It's got a little more bass to it, given that it's a larger device. It can kind of work as an echo chamber. This is a bit tinny, but it gets really, really loud. Built-in Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.3. A 5,000 milliamp hour battery, so it's a lot smaller than the OG Odin 2. That one was coming in at 8,000, but we do have 65 watt PD fast charging with this, as opposed to 45 with the original. It's running Android 13 with the optional Odin launcher if you want to use it that way, or you can install any third-party Android launcher. And the weight on this is coming in at 320 grams, significantly lighter than the original Odin 2. I personally don't use the Odin launcher much, but I did want to give you a look at it. You can set this up so it'll automatically boot here. We can customize our interface, we can add new applications. Anything you sideload or download from Google Play can be displayed here. We can change the size of these icons, we can change the background. And if we swipe over from the left or the right-hand side, we've got a few options that we can enable. We do have a game section, entertainment, productivity. It'll give you a little bit of a walkthrough so you can actually organize the Odin launcher pretty nicely. We can also swap out our performance mode, and we'll take a closer look at that in a second. But over from the right-hand side, we've got a lot of basic Android settings like our brightness, Wi-Fi, and things like that. Now again, I'm kind of used to using the AOSP launcher or even installing a third-party launcher, but this can definitely get you by. It's simple enough for anybody to use. Right along with the Odin launcher, we've also got some other device-specific settings here. So I've just resorted to recording the screen on the Odin 2 Mini, and it's just going to make it a bit easier to see everything because we've got quite a few settings that we can use with this device, specifically for the Odin 2 Mini. Swiping down from the top, you can see here that we've got a few little sections here that are on normal Android devices, like our performance mode. Standard, performance, high performance. Basically, this is going to change how the governor works. Obviously, high performance is going to give us the best we can get out of this device. And usually, I'm sitting at around performance. For Genshin Impact, high performance, if you want to go to the maximum settings there and get that 60 FPS. But with high performance, you really want to set this up with, let's say, smart or a sport fan. You can also customize the fan on this new software. And I'll tell you, at max, you can hear this fan. It's not crazy, and while you're playing a game, you've got that volume up past 20-30%. You're really not even going to notice it. Usually, I'm sitting at sport, does a really good job keeping it nice and chilly, and we can still get amazing performance out of this device. Controller style, Xbox, Odin, disconnect the built-in controller. So if you want to set this up with, let's say, HDMI or even USB Type-C to HDMI, you can totally disable the internal controller. That way, when you start up a game, it won't recognize that one, and you can use your external controllers really easily. L2 and R2 mode, analog, digital, or both. I'm usually around analog here. Auto rotate, keep screen on. So from here, there's not a lot of extra settings for the Odin, but there are more in settings. We've actually got dedicated Odin settings. Vibration strength, we can set this up to as high as it can go. I've been set to medium since I've had the device, and it's not bad at all. Charging LED indicator, if you want to go ahead and cut that off, you can. Video output, I'm actually using USB Type-C to HDMI. And with this, we can actually go all the way up to 4K 60, 2.5K 144 Hz, 1080 60, 1080 120, or 1080 240. This is really great, and I personally have not tested that micro HDMI port on the top, but these resolutions look pretty good, and if you're just looking kind of mid-range there, you can go up to that 2.5K, and it's really going to be hard to tell the difference between that and 4K. Really awesome that we have those options. While we're plugged in over either HDMI or USB Type-C, we can turn the screen off or leave it enabled. No auto sleep once we're plugged in. USB connection notice, and I have tested a USB Type-C hard drive just connected so I could transfer some stuff over right through the built-in file manager. Not a problem to get all of your games on that internal storage, or you can always go the micro SD card route. Show current network speed, controller style, Odin, Xbox. I'm going to leave it at Xbox, so if I'm really used to that, and Odin is really going to kind of give us that switch button style. For me, used to the Xbox, so I'm going with that. Joystick calibration and gamepad test, and I actually had to use this on the original Odin 2 once I flashed full firmware to the unit. So I had to disable them, re-enable them, joystick calibration. It's pretty easy to do. This is set up really nice out of the box, but again, you can always calibrate this to your liking. Analog dead zone travel, fully adjustable. So yeah, I think what they've got here is really nice. We've also got a virtual mouse. So once this is enabled, we can hold down 2 keys to kind of set our shortcut up. So I'm going to go with both of my triggers. Just going to hold them down. It's going to make that my virtual mouse shortcut. So now I can actually use that mouse with the left analog stick. And when I want to disable this, I'll just hold those 2 hotkeys that I set up, and it's disabled. So you don't have to go back in here every time. You just need to enable it once and set up a hotkey. Other than that, got some virtual RAM swap. You can disable different apps. Run script as root, factory settings, enter setup wizard. Personally, liking what they've done here. And the software from the original Odin 2 is kind of transferred over here. Got a few new things here and there, and it's coming with firmware. So once, a lot of people get their hands on this, if we run into any issues, they can always fix that with an OTA patch. And speaking of OTA updates, you can always check for updates right here. I'm on the latest version at the time of making this video, 1.0.0.90. And while I'm here, I figured I'd go ahead and show you some in-game settings that we can use. We're going to go with Minecraft, definitely an easier one to run. We're at about 18 chunks right now. Everything's going to load up. Minecraft is going to run just fine on the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. Really, not going to have any issues. Built-in controller works just fine with this game and a lot of others on Android. But with all of this, we've got the in-game settings. So if we swipe over from the right-hand side, you're going to see our in-game control center. From here, we've got a key mapper. This is going to allow us to set up different touch points on screen, and those touch points are going to correspond to the physical controller. Minecraft doesn't need this, but it does come in handy for games like Genshin Impact, which don't natively support controllers on Android. I've been experimenting with it, and it does work out really well. There's a guide over here, so if you do need to kind of just get an idea of what everything does, really easy to follow. Moving down a bit, speed up, kill some background tasks for us. Gamepad, follow global, AFK. So if I wanted to go AFK with this game and just let it run, we can enable that. That way the screen doesn't close down on us. There's a live mode, which will allow us to stream directly to YouTube from the device. Built-in screen recorder, 1080p, 60 FPS. We've also got our brightness control right here. And right under that, you'll see our FPS, CPU temperature, CPU usage, and memory usage. But one of my favorite things here is the on-screen FPS counter. Just by tapping that once, it'll bring it on screen. We can move this anywhere. And a lot of games on Android don't have a built-in FPS counter. So this is really nice if you're just trying to test out, the performance of your game. I only really use this for Android games. When you move over to like emulators, most of them have their own built-in FPS counter. But again, you want to play something like Minecraft, it's going to run it just fine. And really, with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, basically every game that I've been able to run from Google Play has played at full speed, and I can really even max the graphics out. I wanted to jump into a little more native Android gameplay, so here we have Call of Duty Mobile. We're at high settings, 60 FPS, and this device could handle 90, but we don't have a 90 Hz display. Of course, over HDMI or using USB Type-C video out, we could go up to 90 with the correct display connected, but right now we're right here at 60, and it plays just fine. The built-in controller is detected by most Android games as an Xbox controller, so even Call of Duty Mobile works with it.
Targets in sight. Reloading. Cover me.
Of course, we had to test out Genshin Impact here, and as we know, we still don't have native controller support for this game. But luckily, with the Odin settings, we've got that key mapper. It's pretty easy to use. Now, I've already set up a profile here. Basically, you're just going to drag and drop what buttons you want. We'll map that button, place it on screen, go ahead and save, and now we can use these physical buttons as on-screen touch points. Genshin Impact on the Odin 2 Mini with that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 can go up to the highest settings at 60 FPS. Right now I'm at the highest, but I personally turn off motion blur and bloom. I'm just not a big fan of it. and we've got that FPS counter on screen. Every once in a while, got a little bit of a fluctuation there, but it's a pretty smooth experience given that it's Genshin Impact for Android. If the developers spend a little more time optimizing for Android, you'd have a much better experience on a lot of devices, but it's so fragmented given we've got 1,000 different chipsets they need to optimize for, as opposed to iOS where they're working with, 6 chipsets right now they need to optimize this game for. So it's actually a lot easier for them to kind of get this game running much better over there. But either way you look at it, any Android game you throw at this is going to run just fine. We've got plenty of power here. Now I want to move over to some emulation, but first things first, I want to test out this D-pad. And again, I love the feel of this thing. You can really feel that you're actually hitting the correct button. And for fighting games, having that nice roll just works out absolutely amazingly. I've got Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for Dreamcast. I'm using Redream. We're at 1280 by 960, but we could upscale even more. Personally, I still think these fighting games look just fine at that resolution. And it's so simple to pull off these special moves, but I will tell you, you kind of got to go at it just a bit of a different way. Again, it kind of feels like an analog stick the way they've got this set up. And overall, I've really been enjoying the D-pad on the Odin 2 Mini. One of the big use case scenarios for these Odin devices is emulation on the go, and when it comes to PSP, this is going to run any game that is supported by PPSSPP, upscaled to even 7x resolution. This is Ghost of Sparta, we're at 7x, Vulcan backend, don't have any of the hacks on, no speed ups or anything like that, no frame skip, we're at a constant 60 FPS. If you'd like to see a full PSP game showcase on this device, let me know in the comments below. I've got a ton of stuff loaded up on here. But the next thing I wanted to take a look at was some PS2 emulation using Nether SX2. Tekken 5, 3x resolution, and I got a feeling we could go up to 4 with this device. I'm in high performance mode right now and the fan is set to sport. While you're playing a game, you're not going to hear that fan. As long as you've got the sound on, you will not hear it. Even if I max this out, I've got the volume right now at about 50%. The speakers on this get really loud, but they're a lot more tinier than the original Odin 2, and it's really because there's just no echo chamber in this device. It's a lot smaller. Here's God of War for PS2, still at 3x, without a hitch. I mean, we can run through this at 60. I tested a few more games like Ratchet & Clank, again at 3x. This device performs awesome with PS2 emulation. And finally, we've got some GameCube and Wii emulation using the Dolphin emulator, and I've always been a big fan of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 when it comes to Dolphin. When you're using Snapdragon, you definitely want to use that OpenGL backend. That's just exactly what the devs say. It makes a big difference. You can get much better performance out of this with OpenGL with most games. Now, there are a few here and there that may need to use Vulkan, but with both of the games that I tested here, Automodalista and Rogue Squadron 2, we're at 1080p. So we are upscaled here over the native GameCube resolution, and these games are playing just fine on this device. So again, if you were looking to upgrade from the original Odin 2 and you were expecting better performance, it's really not going to happen because we've got that same chipset. It really comes down to this mini LED display. We've also got those Hall-based analog sticks which work out really well, and a much smaller form factor. So first impressions here, I personally do like the form factor. Now, if you've got much larger hands, then the original Odin 2 is probably going to be your best bet. But if you're looking for something that'll fit right in your pocket without an issue and isn't much bigger than the original PS Vita, the Odin 2 Mini is checking a lot of those boxes. I do like this screen, and I will have a full review video coming up in the next week or so. I need to spend more time with this. I definitely want to get right down to it and check out this mini LED display against the original IPS and the Odin 2. But, just first glance, with this thing going up to 1100 nits of brightness, I mean, it looks really good. Battery life is another thing I like to check out, given that we're going from an 8000 in the original Odin 2 down to a 5000. I'm not sure how much less or more power this mini LED panel is pulling than the IPS. Usually when it comes to these mini LEDs, they're pretty low power, but you never know exactly what they used. And I'd love to cycle this battery a few times just to get a real good feel of what kind of battery life we're going to be seeing out of this. But so far, I've been enjoying the Odin 2 Mini. But is it a big upgrade over the Odin 2? Well, when it comes to performance, no, because they've got that same Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. But if you were looking for a mini LED display and a smaller form factor, then this actually might be perfect for you. Another thing here was that sound. Now, the sound isn't horrible, It gets super loud, but it is much tinier than the original Odin 2, so that's definitely something to keep in mind also. But that's going to wrap it up for my first look video at the AYN Odin 2. Let me know what you think about the form factor and size of this device compared to the Odin 2. And if there's anything else you want to see running on the Odin 2 Mini in my full review, just let me know in the comments. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. And like always, thanks for watching.